Alright, so we're recording now. This is Jaron Abdallah, and today is March 1st, 2012, and I'm here with Mr. Joe Flipse. Mr. Flipse, do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hopefully somebody will listen to it sometime.
I'm sure they will. I was wondering if we could start today with your family background. How did your family come to Tennessee? Where did they live?
Okay, well, my dad was a Dutch immigrant, and as usual, they ended up in northern New Jersey. That's where all the Dutch immigrants ended up, either there or in Michigan and that part of the country. So he moved around and tried it and changed employers, trying to improve himself economically. And we ended up in Florida, and then by way of Maryland, and then back up to Tennessee, where if my dad had, I think, 40 hours of professional schooling at the university, that he could get a professional rating with the Soil Conservation Service. Well, by the time he got his 40 hours, which he did, the budget got cut, and that was the end of the program. Now, he went right across the street in Nashville and with the Army Engineers and got hired immediately. So it's a I guess reservoir manager assistant, or I don't know what the title was. He worked at Old Hickory till he retired. And one nice fall day, he went out to Readyville to an advertised auction and bought that damn mill. And that was the beginning of our problem. I had come back from Southeast Asia. I was in the festivities in Laos, and I had just come back. I'd been over there for 8 years with the federal government, and my family was in Florida because I went back to Florida. That's where we knew best. And I bought a nice little place in St. Pete. Believe it or not, I'm going to digress a little. Houses were I paid $9,000 for that house. And I sold it for, I don't know, 11 or 12. I thought, boy, I really made out. And now it's probably worth $100,500. But anyway, I moved the family up to Readyville. We bought a trailer, and I moved up there and started to work on the mill and rearranging things. And am I getting ahead of yourself of the program?
No,
okay,
not at all.
we're heading in the direction we're supposed to be.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Okay, well, what I found out real fast, I still had a GI Bill coming. My mother was a professional librarian. She had finished her degree while my dad was getting his 40 hours. And she talked to Martha White about the GI Bill and training program and serving apprenticeship with them. And in the process, we found out that nobody was producing cornmeal the old way, and there really was no market for it. So it was more white flour than anything else. And Martha White told Ma that they didn't have it. They weren't any millers. They didn't mill, even though they controlled this whole area economically. They didn't mill any wheat or make any flour at all. They bought it by the carload from up north. So there was no as you might say, learning program or whatever in this area. It was just consumer business, which, you know, was no help whatsoever to me trying to run the mill and thinking we had always been interested in natural foods and that kind of stuff. So in the process of this, I'm finding out what the awareness was in the area, and all the ladies in the immediate vicinity that had made homemade biscuits. We lost a whole generation there. They were, it seemed to me, they were interested in impressing their neighbors. Say, hell, I use frozen biscuits. I don't make that biscuits from scratch anymore, because that was a timely process, etc., etc., etc. A lot easier just to pop a can and have some biscuits for breakfast. So anyway, that mill, it existed on white patent flour. They call it patent flour. That was a process by a long process. There's a long process and a short process. Readyville was a long process mill, and
What does that mean?
long process is just it goes up and down. It goes through the mill many times, and it gets finer and finer and more refined as it goes. A short process is a small mill that's no bigger than this table, maybe 4 foot long by 4 foot high, and it does the same thing in that short process mill, but it doesn't have the capacity that, or et cetera, to do what a big outfit would do. It would be a handheld, comparable to a handheld electronic outfit compared to a big fancy stereo outfit at a radio station. A difference in the quality of the product. But if for in the country, and for energy-wise, etc., I was in an old mill, part of the process. At that time, in the early 70s, these old mills were junk. That's all they were. They weren't running anymore. And it was possible to go around and look at things that had been, and accumulate stones and accumulate mills that there had been in this whole area, because people had, in other words, bread in this area was cornbread. White bread was wheat bread. So when somebody says bread, that we ate bread, or we went to the mill and had a tern ground. You ground a tern with, you waited your turn at the mill. And the kids, they had a special sack for the meal, and the kids went with them. Usually was a younger person, and whoever could control a mule or whatever process, or even if they walked, if they lived close enough to the mill. And they went to the mill once a week, once a month, ground a tern, and put it in that meal sack, and then back home. So everything has changed, but at that time there were still old mills in this area. Everywhere there was a good source of water or power, there was a mill. Evidently it was a lucrative type thing. There wasn't anybody left running. Brown's Mill over here, it ran, and Keel McElroy ran that mill, and it banged up in a few years, in the water department, I think, here took it over. I bought white flour from the mill in Columbia, the big mill, and sold that because it didn't pay me. And what I'm getting at is I made the decision to strip that mill down and just grind the old way. No more long process patent flour. We just grind meal. Even we ground wheat, but it was coarse. And Seventh-day Adventists were my best customers, and it was a coarse, really coarse. Like I know one book we read, upstate New York, he called it rocket fuel. It was really rocket fuel with that brand in it. People did not have any problem with constipation, believe me. So for that problem, it worked out pretty good. And we made cornmeal, buckwheat, flour, all types of things. We made I think it was a 5-grain cereal, which was soybeans and buckwheat and other stuff. Wheat and corn and I guess rye. I don't remember. It's been a long time ago, but it was about a 5-grain cereal, something like that. And it was a good tasting cereal too. Most of the stuff was sold in 2-pound bags. We had to get our bags designed, redesigned. The whole thing was a matter of going back to the old way, and everybody say, "Oh, we don't do that anymore." We had to redo a lot of things. I know, and the design of the mill sacks, even a simple little thing like that, we couldn't. Let me get this straight in my head. What happened is we had a picture of the mill on there, and they wanted to make a new style, and we wanted the old style, and we'd send it back and drawings back and forth to the artist. And I guess he really got insulted because we get these fancy drawings, and with a piece of see-through stuff over the top, and I get a marking pen and mark all over the thing and say, "That's the way I want it." And it took a while to get it back, but they insisted the water had to be blue. No, I said, "I want that thing black, completely black." I called them on the phone. I said, "Stop the presses. You know, you're doing, oh, we'll ship them already. Don't worry about it." So I let my dad work it out with the salesman, and he made an adjustment. Because there was only one place in Tennessee we could get those sacks made, somewhere over in Bristol. And I don't know if they're still in business or not. But there was a problem, of having the sacks made to this, to this, to this, to that, everything else.
What was the name of the brand that you sold?
This Readyville Mills.
Okay.
We had a picture of the mill on there, and before now it was king of patents. The white flour was king of patents before, but I didn't sell any more white flour. Everything just went out under Readyville Mills. That was. And we didn't see what happened. My dad and my mother were more or less, I'd call, educated people. They weren't practical people. And the first time we went to the mill, Dad had told me all this stuff. I was in St. Pete. I came up, Volkswagen, blew the engine on the way up. I'd just come back from Southeast Asia, moved to Florida. But about halfway out between, I guess it was in Kittrell, that's where it was. It was back this side of Kittrell. There used to be a grocery store there, and it later burned. I said, "Dad, stop here a minute." And I went in there, I said, "Tell me about this king of patent flowers." I said, "Do you carry that?" He said, "Yeah, that guy give me a lot of baloney." He said he'd be around and he wouldn't be. Well, I found out old man Justice had slipped it to somebody else. And old man Justice was pretty slick. He was the owner of the mill. He inherited it, but from his brother's estate back in the 30s. But old man, and he'd sell it to people until he wouldn't show them the books. But he'd tell them all about his red hot business. And anyway, that was the end of that. Then we got to the mill the same day, and there on the wall was the feed license. That it was expired 2 years ago. That was from the state of Tennessee, was the license to sell feed. So I proceeded there, to running the mill, and Ray, one of Justice's sons, who was still there. He knew how to run the mill. I didn't know anything about milling. I'm an ag engineer, but I didn't know anything about millers and milling flour. So we did $30 the first month. I told Dad, I said, we ain't gonna make it. So we got to do something. We changed the thing gradually. But I thought, boy, these Tennessee women are the most impolite I have ever had anything to do with. They just drive up there and blow the horn. They don't get out of the car. They just, later I got my mother out there at the mill, but I just found out, just in the last couple of years, talking to my neighbors here in Las Casas, that was the moonshine headquarters of the whole county.
The mill?
The mill, right. That's how they made it in the mill.
Oh.
Was with whiskey. And Cannon County is known. In fact, I just saw on Channel 2, or one of the more popular channels, that they had just legalized moonshine whiskey again. So the mill used to grind all the corn. I used to grind the corn for all the liquor made in the county, the good stuff. Now, the other stuff that wasn't good, the floor sweeping stuff, that they did floor sweepings, anything they could get cheap is what went. But ground floor was high quality neighborhood medicinal stuff, you might call it. It really wasn't medicinal, but in fact, this was a big problem for my mother, that we were making untaxed, stuff for untaxed whiskey. It was illegal, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, blah, blah, this and blah, blah, that. And I said, Ma, look, we're selling, whether we sell it by the 50-pound sack or the 5-pound sack, we got no control of what they do with it when they leave here, whether they throw it away or whether they let it spoil or put it under the sink to feed the damn weevils. We got no control over that. So as long as we're making good stuff at a good price, and we'll sell it and we'll see what happens. So before we sold the mill, we'd gotten it up to about $2,000 a month, which was pretty good. We sold honey and all kind of stuff. Yeah, I guess you'd call it. Things were different in Tennessee then. I guess this was the only health food store, if you could call it that, anywhere around. But at that time, I know Mom and Dad were going to really have my wife and I, she being from Southeast Asia native, was going to take us out to a real meal, and we went to Omni Hut in Smyrna. That was the only Oriental place, period, in Nashville or anywhere else around, was Omni Hut. And hell, that was, I talked to the guy later, I got to know him, and that was Uncle Ben's, right? He just wanted something quick and easy. But anyway, that shows you. And now there's Oriental restaurant on every street corner, where there weren't any at all. You couldn't even buy soy sauce other than Chung King special. You couldn't. There wasn't an Oriental store in Murfreesboro or Middle Tennessee, and the same thing goes pretty much for a health food store. So we were actually ahead of our time, and growing organic vegetables in the garden there, which sold pretty good. We finally opened the store, a Sunshine Market in Nashville opened up, and I sold them celery and things like that. But here again, you can't drive that many miles and buy, 5-10 pounds of celery. So that didn't work out either. And we tried a lot of different things there at the mill. But as far as the mechanics of running the mill and the product, a whiskey meal had to be ground a certain way. Table meal had to be ground a different way. Whiskey meal, let's see, you want it. And then there's a thing called the miller's finger. I used to ask the girl that from rubbing the grain, trying to get the, it's called the size of the mix between your thumb and your forefinger. By rubbing it like that, you gauge the fineness or the coarseness of the meal. A whiskey meal has to be, if it's too fine, it makes a cake in the bottom. If it's too coarse, it works too much, and it doesn't. You don't get the alcohol out of the grain. So there's a lot of little tricks. Like, it's just no different than any other business. They're just little tricks you learn as you go along. And redoing the mill and taking all the spouts. See, the long process would grind the meal, grind the grain, and then with a roller process, send it on up. You go up through the sifter, and then back down. And what didn't get sifted good down the grade to go back through that first machine again. And it kept going through the process, and there were 4 stands. You call them stands of different quality of what do I want to say? In other words, different fineness, grades of fineness, and they'd go up through the sifter. I'm saying sifter. It's called a bolter. It'd go up through the bolter again, which is I took it apart, the bolter, and put it up in the old ice house. There was an ice house also at the mill, an electric generator there to generate the electricity. And the TVA came in. The senior justice told me that he told the folks that talked to TVA that was the end of the juice from the mill. They used to run it from, I don't know, about sundown till 7 or 8 o'clock at night, something like that. Readyville was a commercial little center. It was a bank there and everything else. And there was a toll gate there for the road to Murfreesboro, was toll road. And everybody was so proud that they knew the route to come through the mill and ford the river and go that way and get around the toll station. And then come back up on a toll road on the other side of the river. And that was all horse and wagons, I guess. I've heard old timers tell me about that. But anyway, it worked for a while there, and then I finally told Dad that this thing may be fascinating to you, but for me to stand here the rest of my life and watch it go in one hole and out another hole, ain't getting it for me. It's not my idea of lifestyle is what you would call it now. We didn't have a word for it then. Now that's pretty much it. And I was thinking 40 million things to tell you after you leave.
Well, we've definitely got a lot of time left where, if you can think of anything, but you said you were interested in natural foods?
At that time we were, right.
I'm just interested to know where that came from. Is that something that your parents...
My mother was big on that stuff. I was thinking today, I had a sign up in the mill, a honey was $15. Now listen, believe this or not, $15 for a 5-gallon tin. And she paid 15 gallons for a 5-gallon tin before the Second World War. So I was thinking this morning that, I don't, as a kid, I didn't pay any attention to what I was eating, but I know about that honey business because I remember her talking about the price of that honey. And that was pretty expensive at that time, I guess.
Where did she get that honey?
But still, in 70s, this was in New Jersey, and she probably had ordered that honey through the mail somehow, somewhere, either upstate New York or New Jersey local, I don't know. But when we were at Readyville, hell, I was selling honey for $15, still $15. And, this local honey, just out of the comb and out of the extractor and in the bucket for $15. Not fancy stuff, but good table grade honey.
Did you make that honey?
Beg your pardon?
Did you make that honey?
No, I got it from, there was one old man that's still in the honey business. There was some old guys still in the honey business, believe it or not. And I guess there still are around here. I've gotten away from everything. There's, if you get down to the real nitty-gritty, honey is sugar. And that's it. And according to the experts, we eat too much sugar. I don't know whether it makes any difference whether it's honey or whether it's sugar.
I don't know.
So, anyway, that's the honey story. So, I had bees. I had a lot of bees. I had I had bees, and I had to move them because there at the mill, my folks quit their government jobs in Nashville and retired, etc., and put a double-wide trailer, about a used trailer, and put it out at the mill, and in addition to the one I was living in. And I had to move the bees a couple of times for different reasons. And I finally sold them to a fellow who was a retired preacher up in McMinnville. He was making honey. And that was the end of the bees. And then later, after we sold the mill, then I moved up to McMinnville. I had a little farm. And the fellow had some bees in the side of a house and wanted me to get them out. So I got them out. And then later we moved down here. And oh, they got mean, boy. Somehow they crossed up with black bees, and Dad got one of the local guys here, Johnson. I guess he's passed on now too. And it really ate him up, boy. They had all their equipment on and everything else, and boy, they'd make honey though. Usually the meaner they are, the better they make the honey. And then Dad, I told him, I said, just take those bees and you run that hive. And then he got a lot more stuff. And then he ran up to about 10 hives. I guess he had 10, 15 hives. And then we started this dwindling problem, disease in bees. And he passed on, and I just sold the whole mess for almost nothing. They gave it away. So that was the end of the bee business. And the organic foods and all the rest of it. I was just ahead of my time with organic foods. There was no, we were selling rock phosphate and hybridite, which is a source of potash and things, natural fertilizers, trying to get them started in this area. We were hauling going into Murfreesboro off the siding and get a railroad car of hybridite or rock phosphate, haul it back to the mill and selling it for just about nothing. And Gasson's guys came in, and I thought, well, here's a good market for natural foods and things. These are California people. Are you aware of Gasson? Mm-hmm. He was a big guru that came in here in the 70s. They traveled around the United States in buses and etc. And they finally decided on buying a place over there near you, actually, around Summertown.
Oh. The farm?
Yeah, right,
okay.
Right. And I guess it didn't work out because last I heard, that it split it all up. And
I don't know much about it.
Anyway.
So they came in and...
Yeah, my dad, see here again, he was with the Army Engineers in the campgrounds and etc. And he saw Gaston and said, hey, we got some stuff, we got a mill, etc. He thought he'd be a good customer. Well, they brought stuff down from, they worked up in Nebraska and Kansas, up in the wheat country, and hard wheat. And I'd never ground any hard wheat. Boy, that was tough stuff. And I told them, no more hard wheat, guys. We grind soft wheat in this area. And hard wheat, it's hard. And it hit those stones were for, soft wheat, not for hard wheat. There's different varieties of wheat, but soft wheat is a lower protein in what you might call cake flour. The things with lower protein don't see when it rises. You don't want it to rise; it get lumpy in a cake. But in pizza, you want something up about 20% or higher for protein wise. So you get that stretch and all the rest of that stuff on a thin crust, where cake flour just fall all apart. Cakes or biscuits, you don't want any lumps in those, but you want that strength in it for pizza or bread flour, etc., etc. As you go up the line, you get the protein changes quite a bit. Now, where was I?
We were talking about natural foods.
Oh, okay. So.
Oh, we're talking about the people at the farm.
Yeah, well, they had it kind of funny. These were California people, and people, the ones that weren't from California, were on food stamps and etc. And that's why they were there. And then I later found out that little old ladies in California were supporting this outfit. So that was part of the big mystique and making it off the land. Because the first thing they found out was they got a couple hives of bees. They were going to go in the bee business, and they got stung. So they decided that they better not exploit the bees. What they were doing, you were exploiting the bees. And then they decided they'd farm and they'd grow vegetables. They talked to me about growing vegetables, and you know, I'd worked in commercial stuff in Florida at summer times and weekends out of school in Sanford, where I lived in Sanford, out from Sanford, Florida, what used to be the celery capital of the world, but that kind of went down. Taxes went up and property values went up, and it's more lucrative to plant a house instead of a celery plant. So, but anyway, after 2 loads of manure and a sore backs, they decided that they weren't interested in the vegetable business either. That they weren't going to exploit the vegetables. So I don't know, that was about where I left it, because they started making molasses, and they made really good molasses. It was thick. It was double thick, and boy, it sold good. But they decided to quit making molasses too, and we quit doing business with them because of some financial problems, and they quit messing with us, and they decided to buy everything from, like, Robert Orr was a big industrial supplier in Nashville. So one thing led to another, and on and on and on.
It's funny that you mentioned celery, because in a previous interview that I did with Miss Tate, who we talked about earlier, her dad was the mailman. She mentioned specifically that you were growing celery out at the mill, and for some reason the soil in that area isn't good for celery, but that somehow you had gotten celery to grow. And is that something that you had to work to do, or?
Well, I've been raised in the celery business around it, you know, in Florida. That was an unheard of crop here, I imagine. But the thing with celery is getting the plants up. Once you get them up, it's just a matter of water and fertilizer like anything else, and plenty of water. And yeah, we had an old friend there. Old guy lived up on a hill there, Tennyson Uri. And he had about every kind of piece of junk you could think of, priced right. And I bought this, and I bought that, and I bought a pump from him, and I could run that mill and pump 2-inch stream of water out of that mill race at the same time that I was running the mill. And it didn't, you know, a little water running, a squirt of oil is all it cost. So I just ran the irrigation to the celery. And the rest, actually, that was a very, very good garden spot, because they'd never used any fertilizer on it. It flooded every 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years. In fact, on the side of the mill, and the door between the office and the mill, there was a little hooch on the side of the mill. It's gone now. But on that door was 1937, 1942. All the flood levels were marked on that door. And it flooded about every 4 or 5 years. In fact, that was part of our disenchantment. We got flooded 3 times in 2 months, something like that. I think in about 73. And that was just, I ain't gonna fight that river. And Dad wasn't gonna put out the money to jack the mill up, so that was that. It was going to be there and do that. I couldn't hack it anymore. It didn't make sense to me. It still doesn't make sense. But the county was getting some gravel or doing some kind of business upstream to straighten the creek out, or improve the channel or whatever. I don't know what they were doing. I wasn't plugged in it well enough at that time to find out. But anyway, it really came down, and we had a heavy rainfall that year, so that was part of the problem. Anytime you got water power anywhere, you're limited to the creek level and the power level and the size of the turbine. Now that's one thing needing to straighten out while I'm talking here. That's a Leffel turbine in that mill, and Leffel, we wrote a letter to Leffel, and I tried to get from Leffel the power curve for that turbine. In other words, what RPM did it boot, so I could cut down on the water I was using rather than run the mill. See, before it had to run at a certain speed. It had a speedometer inside, and it's still there, I'm sure. But the speedometer tells you how fast the mill's running, and you got to run it that fast. So I wrote to Leffel, and they wrote me back, and they told me, it cost me $50 a day. $50 was a hell of a lot of money at that time. And they didn't give me any information. But I did find out that they think that that's the original turbine in that mill, and it's not. That turbine in that mill came from Dahlonega, Georgia. The power unit in there. They went down there with a truck and got it from the old, I believe. Now, I don't know if they got it from there or it was just another mill in the area, but Dahlonega at one time was the premier gold producer in the United States, long before California. And now I'm not sure. Ray knew all the story because Ray went down there when the mill was put in. I think the turbine was put in 47. That turbine at the mill, and I just can't remember what Dahlonega didn't mean much to me, and in the history of that mill, whether the first government mint, I believe, was down there. There was a government mint there. There was enough gold to mint gold under government. Whether they had a contract or whether it was officially a mint, I don't know all the details. But so much for the. But then the next fellow that bought that mill, you had to go down. If you got a stick or something caught, it'd catch in the mill. If you got a stick or something caught, you couldn't shut it off because all the gates, they call them gates on there, there were veins that opened up around the edge of the turbine. If one stuck open, the other stuck open, and you couldn't shut it off. It'd get down low and idle, and it'd just sit there and keep idling. So he had to replace, and the kids, of course, they broke it, and instead of welding it up, he had another piece made. But as far as that, whoever runs that mill, if it ever runs again, and I told that fella, I didn't tell him, I told the fella before him, that they need to go under there and check the bearing on that turbine. Because that turbine bearing is made out of lignum vitae, and it's a wooden piece in the bottom. There's big cross arms under there that hold that support that go out to the outside shell, and that bearing in the middle, a shaft sits right on it. It's conical, and that's lignum vitae, and they need to check that and make sure and see whether it's survived or whether it needs replacing or what. But Justice redid that whole, what they call it, a pen, around the turbine, which is the power for that outfit. And then, of course, then the dam went out. That's another problem. Big problem. See, that Dad said, and he knew more about erosion and stuff than I did, but there's one poplar tree right up above that creates turbulence when it floods. It used to flood right over smooth, but it creates turbulence, and one side of it really eat out in the dam. And we discussed fixing that thing many times. There's just too many problems here. Yeah, I tell you, that thing, this is a mean old bitch, that's all. And it just eat money like you could spend money on. This fella that bought the thing, he's really done a nice job on it. But he put new roofs on all the buildings and new siding and on and on and on. I don't know how much money he spent there. He's got it looking good.
Have you been there for breakfast?
No, I haven't. Some of my neighbors have been there for. Are they running a breakfast?
Yeah, on Saturday mornings.
Oh, it's a regular scheduled deal now. Huh?
I think so. Yeah. So why did your dad buy the mill? He didn't have any experience with mills. Why
did he buy it? He only paid $5,000 for it.
And what was he hoping to?
Hell, oh no. He was looking at retirement in the Army Engineers, and I never asked him, why'd you buy that mill? That would have been, my mother used to say, oh, yeah, I've cried myself to sleep so many times over that mill. Every damn time it'd be something tore up. And fortunately, I was, enough of a piddler that I, could translate, and I'd just done this kind of stuff in Southeast Asia to keep going. Running Babbitt bearings and all that kind of stuff, which is lost art here, was, that was just normal stuff to me. But I don't know if that mill will ever run again. But one of my oldest boys, he went in the Army. He says it'll never run again. I don't know. All the belts are off the mill underneath. And
I'm not really sure what state the original stuff. I know they mill there, but they don't use the original equipment.
Yeah,
that's in
they
there,
couldn't.
The stones and stuff that you would have used because the
right,
dam
everything's all apart. Well, it just hasn't worked out, That fella that bought it, his son-in-law was going to run it for him. And there's...
Are you talking about Mr. Epperly?
Yeah, Epperly's son-in-law was going to run it. Now, that didn't work out. And before that, Bill Kerrigan ran it, Bill and Marie, and hell, he ran up bills all over the place. I guess I'll get sued with all this, the Freedom of Information Act. But, it just, and this fella here, he'll never get a return on his money. He made what I think I made big mistake trying to run the mill. I should have just made a junk store out of it. I mean, there was 3 floors in the mill. There was a big warehouse and an old ice plant with a lot of roof. And you could have just kept patching the leaks. But it was I was either behind my time or ahead of my time, one of the other. I haven't figured out which one it was, but I gotta go drain my radiator. Okay. I don't know if I got anything more to say.
Well, what was it like moving to Readyville? Did you live in Readyville when you were working at the mill?
Yeah, I bought a trailer and kicked myself in the rear end. Boy, every morning I'd get up and something else had fell off a damn thing. Paid cash for it. $4,000 at that time for a trailer. The part of the problem was I came back from overseas with about $30,000 cash money in my pocket. At $30,000 at that time, my folks had just built a 3-bedroom brick house in Hendersonville for $15,000 or $16,000. So that was 2 houses. I was banking a house a year. That was, inflation was good to me. But then the effects of the war and all the rest of that hit this country, and that was the end of that. I bought an old place up in McMinnville, and I doubled my money on that. So I wasn't rich, but I survived. That I never had to work for anybody else again. That was, except I did work for about a year. I went to vocational school. I still had GI Bill coming after we sold the mill. That I was thinking, oh, poor Mom. See, they took, I don't know who took bankruptcy. Yeah, I guess Epperly took bankruptcy. And I told her, I said, hell, you got it made now. You got the judge in Nashville making sure you get the payments while it's in bankruptcy. I said, and he's got some assets because he had, of course, 2 of them burned shortly thereafter. Anyway.
What burned?
Epperly's assets.
Oh.
Real estate holding. But anyway, I went to work for the vocational school. I was a student there first, and then one of the instructors left. He went to Nashville to get an annual checkup, and I was taking care of his class temporarily, and I ended up there permanently in the refrigeration class. So I had a little farm there, and I still wanted to farm. I had that thing in my... I've had enough of it now. Had enough.
I have a great uncle who owns a dairy farm in New York. And he's out there all day, every day.
Yeah, all day, every day. And he can't get out.
Mm-mm.
That's the thing, and that's a nice thing about farming. They never tell you that. It's easy to get in, and you can't get out. It's like getting married, I guess. All these back to the land deals and all the rest of this stuff, how I made it, and nobody talks about their back. If you don't have a good back, forget it. That is the most important thing about it. It's not money. It's not. I used to think, geez, they never talk about the nearings or et cetera, some of these back to the land people. They never talk about the budget. Now somehow they were making money, but the back is the problem. If you don't have a good back, and everything is heavy on a farm, ain't nothing like.
So when did your family buy the mill, and then when did you sell it?
They bought it in 1970. fall of '70. See, it was a day like today, a beautiful day, and in fall. I was in Florida. I did the hell with government and all the rest of it. But that deal in Southeast Asia, I was just disgusted. And come home, the American people weren't behind it, and it's just a mess. Where you been? Oh, what do you do? I was over in Southeast Asia. Oh, kind of hot over there, ain't it? Yeah, that was that. So anyway, I guess we shouldn't have been there because we left eventually anyway. But anyway, that was that part. And Dad just, oh hell, when he bought the thing, then he had it, then he was stuck with it. See? So he asked me to come up. I wasn't doing anything. I was gonna. I'd signed up for a computer program. I didn't know what the hell a computer was, but that sounded like something new. That was a common thing in 1970. But somebody advertised in the St. Pete Times that was a good paper, that they were gonna, start a class and et cetera, come over and sign up. So I went over and signed up.
Seems like 180 degrees from the computer class in Florida to running a mill in Readyville.
Absolutely, because the word in the English language, metal, M-E-T-T-L-E, or however the hell you spell it, it's metal in your hands, and your hands turn black. When you pick those stones, little chips fly off that hammer. You use a hammer, and getting the right temper in that hammer, where it's hard and not too soft, or it's soft as a batter and it's too hard it chips off. If you get it right, and you're never going to get it right, but the metal has to be, and they draw it down on the stove, and I never could get those exactly the way I wanted them, but they're pretty good. But what happens, you either wear glasses or goggles, or I usually just a pane of glass. I held it up with one hand and chipped them. But that's the way you sharpen the stones, is chip them. And it brings up a fresh surface. And pick them all day and pick them all night. That's what Ray used to say, Ray Justice. All night long, you hear that bang, bang, boing, boing. You hear it all night long.
So was that something you had to do often to sharpen the stones?
Yeah, those guys, a journeyman millwright would go from mill to mill to mill and sharpen stones. And then traditionally, he'd get so many runs off a stone, or turns, or whatever you want to call it. He'd get so much meal in other words, he did a good job. The stones were sharp. It cut good, according to the power available to the stones. And there were all kind of mills, there were just all kind of half-ass rigs all over the place. Anywhere, the more, as these mills became antiquated, as new developments, one problem was, in the milling business, there was never, like the computer business, there was never a lot of money available for improvements. But computers, was just all kind of money available. Excuse me. But with mills, and the milling business went down, down, down every year. And they're just, some of these big guys started the home delivery and the fresh bread and things like that. And the milling business went down, 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 down. So equipment, as they put in new equipment, then the stones, where those stones at Readyville came from originally, who knows? You know, they might have been in Nashville. They might have been ordered direct from France. Those are French burrs. And there's another set of stones there. But there's a deposit in France, well documented, that it's like flint. And it is hard. And when you hit it, stuff comes off as damn steel. But even the Romans used that same deposit in France, and there's people there that make those up, I guess, because those stones are in pieces. There'd be a piece this big and one this big, and then they're all fitted in. They're cut and they're fitted into the stone. And you just sharpen them, and then they finally wear out and they're gone. It take me, I was by myself, and I was picking the stones. It'd take a couple of weeks. It'd take me I have to stop and take care of a customer and then go up the house and eat and do this and this. I had it. So.
How many stones were there in
Just
the mill?
one run of stones, that's all.
Okay.
So I had to stop. And the mill had originally had 2 runs of stones in there. And I got another run out of an old mill up, I don't even, Burke's Mill, Pike's Mill, Burke's Mill, I believe, further up the creek. And ask me that again. Well, yeah, I forgot already. You remember?
Oh,
what
I was asking how many stones.
Oh,
were in
okay,
the
yeah.
mill.
So anyway, I got a couple extra stones, and I put those underneath the porch, and somebody stole those. That's another thing that happened too. A lot of thievery at the mill after we shut down, or Epperly shut down. So, but that originally, now I don't know if that mill ever had those stones in there, or that was just an old frame that they made it originally for. There were 2, in other words, it had a round hole and it set down in a frame. And there's another hole in that frame. When we went there, my dad said, "Look at that timber up there, boy, that beautiful timber under there." I thumped that thing. And it took a nail and drove it in there, and it just about fell in there. It's just hard on the outside. Even all the timbers under were holding the end of the mill up. The mill was like that. And I thought I was hitting nails. I'd never cut that hard timber like that with a chainsaw before, and it was sparking when I was cutting it. And I said, "Damn, I hit nails." It wasn't nails, it was just that hard of wood. But it was this on the outside. That's all it was left. The inside was just pure rock. The whole end of the mill, it was an old boy that came up from Florida with me. I met him overseas, and he stayed with us. And I was running the mill, and he came back inside. He said, "Hey," he says, "come out here and look at the side of the mill, because the whole damn mill side is because the meal, when you made meal, it came down through the sifter upstairs to catch anything." See, that's a big problem.
So the side of the mill was shaking when you were...
Yeah, the whole side of the mill was going in and out when I was... so I got that fixed. That took a long time. I just pieced those pieces up with steel because I didn't dare take them out. And chased that snake all the way up, and he ended up in my chicken house. I'd put rat bait in there, and damn, every time I cut one of them hollow pieces out, it's full of rat bait. And I thought I was getting rats in there. Hell, all I was doing was putting it grain. They were putting it back. That whole end of that mill, that was over the race. And just to see, it had a 12 by 12 white oak in there, and it rotted out. And he just put another one underneath it. Or somebody did. I don't know who did. I never asked him about that. There were two there, and then over the race, hell, that damn mill was like that. And the big problem was, when you're running those shafts, the length of the mill, and the damn mill is like this. And Keel over here in Malroy, at Brownsville, he busted the shaft 2 times. This, when the mill's sagging, and then the shaft is bending and finally break. But there's just all kind of problems all the time, every damn time. My hearing isn't good anyway, and I run that mill and I hear a noise. What's that? What's that? You know, I was uptight all the time. I was running that damn mill. It wasn't a pleasurable thing, you know, go down to the old mill stream and blah, blah, blah. That was hell running that mill, 'cause then I have to run upstairs 2 or 3 flights to see what happened. And all you could tell was from the sound. And then how something pipe has come down up there in a big pile on the floor, and it ain't going back down where it belongs to go. And then you run back downstairs and shut the mill down and patch for 2 days. And patch it up some more.
So you did a lot of fixing stuff when you ran
That's
the
all
mill.
that was, is steady fixing and patching.
Well, it's so old.
Right.
It's quite an old building.
It's old, all right. And now, I don't know if it, according to what my boy said when he was in there, the floor's all warped up inside the mill. And, you know, I looked underneath along where I put a new beam on the husk. You call that the husk, the stone foundation. But I put a new beam on the side, and where these 2 by 12s or whatever that held the floor up in the mill floor, where they hit, I had to cut them off because they were rotten on the end. And I just put a piece of steel underneath them, and I put another angle iron over here, and I just landed them on that angle iron. It ain't much. The last time I was over there, it's been at least 5 years. I used to stop and see Russell. Russell runs a grocery store out there. Russell was a little kid when I ran the mill. But he used to go up to McMinnville and get nursery stuff. Plants in it. I've got a little greenhouse here, and I grew plants in the spring, and then later I switched to hot pepper, and I sold them these Oriental markets in Nashville. I could get enough volume to where it was worth it, hauling them down there. But I used to stop and see Russell, you know, pick up on the gossip, who shot who, and what was what. Yep.
Did you have a lot of people working there with you?
No, I worked by myself. There wasn't any money to hire anybody. Oh, the guy who worked up the store and lived in the house up front there, he was a student at school. He used to, you know, he'd piddle around the store, and then he'd come down and help me once in a while, just recreation.
And who was that?
Gary was his name. He ended up being I bought that house from him up there, out front. $2,000 to buy a house back then. As it flooded. See, I bought it just after it flooded. $10,000 it bought by any house in Readyville, I believe, at that time. I was going to be smart. I bought a trailer, see. At the time, Cannon County got done swatting me with taxes and other stuff. You know, new guy come into town, we'd take care of him. And
I'm kind of wondering about that, actually. Because
No,
sometimes
hell,
it is hard to come into a small town as an outsider. And so I guess I'm wondering what your interaction was with the community, if that was difficult or...
I didn't have any interaction with the community. I bought my, see, which is probably part of the problem. I was a hot shot, man. You know, I had a college degree and et cetera, and I knew how to run this damn thing. And I did. I fixed that mill up. Where the old stones used to go like that, had an angle, and the whole side of the mill would go in and out too, in conjunction with that other piece up there, because the piece in the center of the stone, the driver, wasn't in the center. It was off center just a little bit, and it put a good kick in it every time. They see, then there were, like this table is about the size of that. That stone was 4 foot, and it had buckets in there, about where these doilies or whatever you call them are. And as you move those up and down, and then change the weight in those to balance out the stone, because it wasn't perfectly balanced. It'd be those stones were irregular size in underneath, and then they'd smooth the top off with plaster of Paris. Or modeling plaster is a lot cheaper, we found out.
So you didn't have much interaction with the community?
No, I should have interacted more. There wasn't much reason to interact. Other than the bank. I went up to the bank and put $1,000 in the bank, boy, and I got to meet the president of the bank. That was really impressive. We didn't borrow money from anybody.
So community members weren't your
They didn't
customers?
No, there weren't any customers. Whiskey. Whiskey customers. And I guess they quit coming. There weren't any customers. That was the big problem. No customers. That's why you figure $20 a month they bought, you know. I guess about a sack of cornmeal ground up was about $5, something like that.
And how many pounds was that?
I don't remember. That it probably maybe 50, 100 pounds. Bad back of hair all over again. Tell you a little story. My uncle ran a gas station. I'd run a gas station up north too. And I had a big fight with Shello about the price of the rent. And he was down here visiting. He came down on vacation. And this guy backed his pickup truck in here. And I drug a sack of meal and threw it on a hand cart and wheeled it out there. And my uncle threw the tarp back. And hell, it was full of antifreeze jugs, which was empty jugs, which everybody used for shine when the antifreeze. I heard him tell that story I don't know how many times. Even he got back up in New Jersey, he thought that damn truckload of moonshine. Thought a real thing. He threw that damn tarp back. See, it was all just a tarp down in the back of that truck. He threw the tarp back so we'd have someplace to land the meal.
That's so interesting. So your main customers were coming through to buy
Right.
to make whiskey. You also
They
mentioned
see, it's not supposed to be for public consumption. I could tell you a bunch, but that's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you a bunch of stories about.
But don't tell me anything that's gonna get you in trouble.
Oh hell, that all happened a long time ago.
But
I could talk about the celery and this and that. That was
but the moonshine's where the real story is.
right. Well, we gradually got away from that. I could tell it from the way they walked when they come in, whether they wanted. I need some rye. What are you gonna do with that rye, boy? I made them tell me. He said, I'm gonna make a paste. I said, okay. I said, hell, here's 100 pounds over there. Take what you want. The rest, feed the hogs. You got any hogs? No. I said, well, I got, that there left over from some other stuff. Don't cost you nothing. Okay, I'll take it. I said, hell, throw it away if you want. After you get done making a paste, they use that rye. See, it's good and sticky. It's a higher protein, and it's good and sticky to plaster up that still after you get it all together.
I know nothing about making moonshine, so.
Well, see, the pipes, really is a half-ass rig, but nothing really fits good. I mean, this one goes in the other, and it leaks steam, and that's leaking whiskey. So you just take a little paste there and plaster it all up before you run it. Mm-hmm. And it's got heat, see, and then all that cakes up and dries hard, and it's all right then. Hey, you thought you were going to find out about running a flour mill, didn't you?
This is much more interesting.
Yeah, well, that's what it was. It turned out, see, women here ain't any different than anywhere else. But they were just blowing the horn to see if anybody staggered to the door. If anybody... Ray, hell, he passed out in there half the time, And he'd hurt his leg somewhere, somehow. So when he walked, and the floors in the mill, hell, they were like that. So when Ray walked, he kind of jerked around. He had an irregular step. People thought he was loaded half the time. He wasn't. He smoked a mill cigar. Let's see. Guys, even like Ray, people don't understand. There's up in these hollows and hills. What's your daughter doing? Oh, she's in Chicago. What's your daughter doing? Yeah, she's an attorney up so. So, I'm thinking of Ray. Ray was in the Army. Ray got a gal in trouble, and he was shotgun wedding, and he hauled ass out of here, and he was working up in Detroit. Everybody went to Detroit City. And he went in the Army. I don't know whether it was then or later. But he was in the Army Engineers, and he was at, the hell, it's not Stuttgart. Where they had the big trial in Germany. But he shot the one of the boys that was guarding the jet plane there. and he, you know, from Readyville, Tennessee.
This is Mr. Justice?
Huh?
Mr. Justice?
Yeah, Justice's boy.
Mm.
Ray. He worked in the mill for a while, and Dad, we didn't pay Ray but $30 to $35 a week, something like that. The hell, we couldn't afford that. There's some more ammunition for Mama to stay awake and cry at night. Well, we finally got out of that damn thing.
And when was that?
It was after when we were here. They were still holding the paper. See, they sold that on a note, and they were carrying the note. They finally got paid off. That, you know, that was for a lot of money at that time. That was $50-some thousand.
And your family sold to Mr. Epperly?
No, we sold it to
The Kerrigans?
Kerrigan.
Okay.
And then they sold it to
Okay.
Epperly. Yeah.
So was that kind of a relief for your family?
What's for me? I don't know about that. I never was close to my father, and now that he's gone, there's a lot of things I wish I'd asked him about that, things like that we never talked about. That was this relief, or why'd you buy that mill, or what'd you think about this or that, or, I think mostly I was young and dumb, and that was, I never considered his feelings. I think that's most of the problem. I probably didn't ever even think he had any feelings or what was going on. Huh. A lot of water over the dam, I'll tell you that.
Mm.
What do you need to know?
Well, you mentioned that Seventh-day Adventists were some of your best customers.
Uh-huh.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they believe in, whole foods and
Okay.
stuff like that. Natural type things. Stay away from the sugar and this and that.
So they would buy cornmeal from you as well as
flour.
Okay, flour
and meal, right?
And vegetables from your garden, or
no, I didn't. I slacked off on the gardening at that time after we got flooded a couple times. That I had lots of ideas. Well, 8 years in Southeast Asia and couldn't do things that I wanted to do, wanted to try, and there, boy, here's a damn ready-made sandbox. Got a damn power source and a garden and we'll get her going. I got her going.
And so what did you do then after your family sold the mill?
Then I went to McMinnville, but I had that farm up there.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to the vocational school to make some money, I got $400 a month. That was big money back then. That's hard to believe. $400 a month under a GI Bill. As I had 4 kids at that time, 2 of them. I got the last one still in school. He waited to be 40-some years old before he finally ended up in dental school.
How many kids do you have?
4.
4.
I have one daughter. She's an attorney. And then the other boy, he just retired out of the Army. And the other one, the other girl, she's snivy, hair deal in Florida. I don't know. Susie, where's Dang now? Is she in Miami? I think she moved in.
She moved to Miami. She's a hairdresser.
She wasn't. She married a couple times. How the kid?
She moved to Hawaii.
Yeah, one of the, hell, that's a whole damn mess of people. Divorces. All the kids who had divorced, except my daughter that's a lawyer. She just moved down here from New Jersey. She had a house up there. They can't get rid of it. And, you know, same old deal. The rest, she makes good money. I gave her this house next door, my folks' house, but it's pretty good haul every day over there to Franklin.
So what, well, I guess I was going to ask, are you still interested in natural foods, and is that still something that's important to you?
Not really. Boy, it is to my daughter. And that irritates me. It really does. Because half of this stuff, she's paying premium prices for it from Whole Foods. There's an example right there. And like wheat. Let's take wheat for you. Hell, nobody sprays wheat. It's organic already. And this and that, except where all the problems mostly happen. Just like your uncle. That cow milk comes out of those cows, there's nothing unorganic about it. But by the time they get done piddling with it, you know, heat it, pasteurize it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And who knows what he's got. I've tried. I don't use anything that, you know, I use Roundup around the buildings to keep the grass down and that kind of stuff, but I don't use any pesticides or stuff that I don't have to. See, a thing that people don't understand, homeowners are the worst violators of all this stuff. A farmer, he's got to get a return. Your uncle ain't going to spend a damn nickel on anything. He better not. He's been in business a long time, hadn't he? All right. Then he already knows.
No, that's a farm that was passed down. You know,
Okay,
my great grandfather, and so now
okay.
my great uncle runs it. And
Where'd you say you went?
upstate New
Rochester?
York, Rochester area.
Where?
Rochester.
Rochester. I know that area, not that particular area. My grandfather had a place in Catskills.
Okay.
My grandfather, grandpa, he came to this country. He had a letter from the mayor of The Hague to the mayor of Patterson, and he got $4 or $3 or $4 an hour. This is in 1920, 2021, early 20, working in the gas generating plant for public service there. They ran on, you know, they made gas, and he got screwed up in everything he touched. He bought chickens, and he sold them all because they wouldn't lay eggs. Well, he found out later that they'd waited another 2 weeks, they'd laid eggs. It's a different kind of chicken. All kind of things like that happened to him. He was always about 2 steps ahead of the sheriff. I mean, that's... When they came out from the city, all these farmers in northern Jersey, if you look at your uncle's farm, if you're ever up there, you may see some patches in the roof. I guess they're all gone now. That's where the pipes came out from the stills. Anybody that had a farm during Prohibition, particularly around New York City, there was a still put up in the barn. So you could ride around and see all the tin patches on the roof there. Grandpa, the deputy sheriff, no, he wasn't called sheriff. What the hell was he called? Anyway, he was a local law. He ran a store, and he supplied all the tins for the booze. And Grandpa, the city's guys from the city set up and run the still in Grandpa's chicken house. He was to get the third run. They ran 2 runs, and then he'd get the third run. He'd get a third all the time. He'd get the third run. Well, hell, as soon as they got 2 runs, they got raided. Always got raided. Every time. Grandpa never got a nickel out of moonshine business. But that was something that he couldn't stand success. See, if he'd have just stayed with the power company at $3 or $4 an hour, man, that was unheard of at that time.
Well, I'd be interested to hear any more stories that you have about, when you ran the mill, or you mentioned some stories that you had heard from other people. I would love to hear those. Just anything you can think of. Even just about the community or Cannon County or...
Well, I think Cannon County was in a changing time when I first moved there. Women were becoming secretaries. They were working for the insurance company. Chromalox had moved in town. GE had moved in here. Samsonite was out there. They were all gone now. But they came in here in the 60s. And sometime in the 60s, moving south for the cheaper labor and all the other stuff. And up there in Cannon County, I don't think it was a damn thing. Shirt factory. Yeah, shirt factories. See, shirt factories had been the women's first escape from the farm. The man stayed back on the farm and piddled. I mean, made enough to maybe pay the mortgage or whatever it was, and raised a few cattle, and this was great sheep country until the dogs got in here, and then that ruined the sheep business, so then it went to cattle. But that was going on, it was a big transition. The women were driving cars. They had to go back and forth to work, and as far as baked goods, forget it. There wasn't any home baking going on. It was, what you could grab at the store on the way back home. I'd say, it was a big transition. But I didn't have much. I didn't have any interaction with the local community, that's for sure. I think that's probably... I wasn't attracted to it. There wasn't any money in it. It wasn't like we could develop customers. Any of this old time stuff, everybody wanted to get away from that. I found that out real fast. The hell with that, why take all that time and make biscuits? And still, when my mother was here, still with me. The state had a program, pretty good program about come to wash them up and nurses and all this kind of stuff. But one of those girls said, my grandmother can make the finest biscuits I've ever seen. And they're just so light. And I asked her, I said, are you sifting your flour? She said, I don't know. I said, is she? I don't know. I said, well, ask her. I said, she's doing something. Find out what kind of flour she's using and watch her make them. That was the end of that. I never heard any feedback or anything. Say, yeah. I ran home real quick and asked Granny what, just say, give her credit for being light. I know damn well she's using frozen biscuits. She ain't beating them. Ain't sifting them. They ain't doing nothing. There it is, kids. Well, I don't blame her. See, the thing is, she's got a job and she's got to go to work. And she's got kids, and, her husband works, she works. There ain't many people can sit around and bat the breeze like this,
It's interesting because I think, one of the main goals of, at least from my understanding of this project to save the mill, and is to have it be available for educational purposes. And I was talking to Miss Tate, who we talked about earlier, and she would bring her classes there when the Kerrigans owned it, and they would show the kids how the mill ran, and they would give them each, I think she said, like a 2-pound bag of cornmeal, and they're making a little bit of cornmeal now that you can buy. And she told me that if you go buy some of the cornmeal from the mill and make your cornbread with that, and she said you'll never go back to regular store-bought cornmeal. But I don't eat a lot of cornbread. It's not something I grew up eating.
Well, see, the big problem with you're talking about, I did call the teachers, and I had the kids come down. I called the Ladies Garden Club in Murfreesboro and had them come out because I was trying to sell hybrid type, which I was. But damn those kids, I'm telling you. I'd say everybody had got pockets. Everybody got pockets. You got pockets? I said, hold your hands up. Okay, everybody hold their hands. I said, now take your hands and put them in your pockets. Damn, I swear it. They have to go over there and pull that damn spout. And there it'd go all over the floor. I said, the hell with this. I ain't getting, there ain't no progress in this. So I didn't interact with the community anymore. And the old ladies, they wanted, with the garden club, hell, they wanted service right then. That was my interaction with the community. But like here, when I grew vegetables, I tried selling stuff locally. I've sold stuff locally in the market. I mean, I'm not a complete idiot, but I tell people, hell, I said I can go to the airport and ship it to Chicago. It's all over within 15 minutes. I said, or maybe an hour if you count the time back and forth. I said, and I ain't got time to piddle with somebody and argue with them over and tell them that this is better and this and that and blah, blah, blah. I can have it go to Chicago. I used to ship Chicago, Oklahoma City, Seattle, Washington, everywhere, right out of here, right off our front porch.
So this isn't when you ran the mill?
No, this is that. Okay. This is where you're at now.
Mm-hmm. With your vegetables?
Yeah.
Did you ship anything when you ran the mill?
No. I was afraid to ship anything because illegal stuff, flour, if you ship out of state, you're subject to the Fed. And how in the hell you can ever sanitize one of those mills? It's impossible. How you sucking this air in there? I mean, when that stones are running, there's a hole that big in the middle of them. You're feeding it in. There ain't no way you can. So I would have been subject to that kind of stuff. Now, he used to be an old guy who used to come out one day a week, Wednesday or Tuesday or something like that, once a month. This old lady go to a bridge game or something, some kind of card game. And he's an old miller from up north. And the way he made, see, this is the thing that I know all this stuff, and I know these guys, and my daughter is paying premium prices for this garbage. But this guy, he took his regular old white flour and stuff and cut it back, or he pulled it off at some spout, and he ran it over a carborundum stone, which is, you know, a grinding stone you grind sharpened tools on. So he had a stone in there somewhere, and he ran his stuff, he poured it over the stone, and it went in the top and came out the bottom, and he called it stone ground. It wasn't no more stone ground than I am. But anyway, he sold it for stone ground. And he sold the hell out of it. Sometimes it just seems like the bigger crook you are, the better you do. There was a guy, when I still had a gas station up in New Jersey. I'd just come back from Germany. And I was waiting for a car to come off a boat. And the guy down the road, he had, this is 58 Chevy was, I guess, the first time they put coil springs under the rear end. And he had a reputation of being the best rear end man in the county. And I asked around about him, and what I found out, he'd get these customers' cars in there for lube job, grease job, something like that. And he'd swat a big old weight on the inside of one of the rear wheels. And people would come back and say, boy, there's something wrong with that car. Since you worked on it, it goes up and bounces and makes all kind of noise. And it's all, he said, I'm sorry, you just got another one. Chevy General Motors has had a lot of problems with those things. He put them back on the rack, take that weight off, and it's like brand new. Man, I'm telling you, wasn't a one that he didn't fix right. He fixed them all. And it seems like those are the kind of people who got a good reputation. You couldn't tell anybody, what are you going to do? Say, look, lady, you got took down there. Can't say that. And that's the same thing that's going on in this Whole Foods business. Now, what they've done is they've got an organic rule. You have to have organic. It's got a government inspection. The regulation says something like, according to general accepted procedures. What the hell is that? Spray. Anything, I'm telling you something. Everybody ought to have to work for the government. They really should.
Why is that?
To find out how incompetent they are. Really, I mean, I'm telling you. This business you're doing right now is government funded. Some way or another. Somebody's writing it off on the taxes.
I really don't.
Yeah, right. Sure. You're one of the. I can't use the N word anymore, but you're one of them out at the end of the line that's doing the work. Up on the other end of the line is a guy getting the tax write-off.
Yeah, I couldn't really tell you.
Well, my problem was I knew too much about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't make any difference. You go ahead and get your degree, and everything will be all right. You see, this is the Gore Foundation, right?
Well, I'm doing this project for PARQ, Preserve the Area's Rural
Okay.
Qualities, which
Uh-huh.
is a group of people in Readyville.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to send a copy of it to the Gore Center.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not funded through them or anything like that. It's just they're going to send a copy of it so that they can keep that on file, and if someone wants to research the history of the mill,
right.
then they'll be able to find this interview and learn all about the moonshine.
Well, I never told Daddy Gore about the moonshine. He asked me, he used to have a helper, kind of a, what do you call him, page, I guess.
Who's
He used
this?
to stop and see me. Congressman Gore.
Oh.
And he had a mill up there at Smithville, that had been, they changed it to a kind of more breakfast type deal, I guess. It's a meeting place now. And he asked me, they asked me to go up there and look at it. And anyway, it had a dam and a this and a that, and then the pipe was busted. And it was a later model. It was made with concrete blocks, and they used steel sash in the windows, and every one of them was knocked out, of course. And I told him, I said, Congressman, I said, it's going to take you 2 years to get the rat stink out of that place. Oh, I don't worry about that. He says, look. He said, I'll get the contract for the state for cornmeal. I said, hell, I said, you can crank more cornmeal out than they can possibly eat. He said, that don't make any difference. He said, I'll just get the contract. That's the way they looked at things. They didn't have a damn thing to do with anything except money. And I said, well, I said, you can stop, come by and look and see what we're doing down there and see if there's anything that's any good to you. I said, but I ain't got time to come up here. I said, every one of those sash there, it's got to be sandblasted, to get that rust off them. And or something, repaint them with something. I said, it'd take a lot of doing. I said, there's the stink in there where the mice been having, a midnight ball or something around it.
And how did you get to know him or come into association with him?
He had a page, I guess you'd call him. It's some kind of flunky that used to be back here, and he was from Murfreesboro. I don't remember that boy's name. But he worked in Gore's office up there in Washington. And he stopped. The first time he stopped, I'd just gotten flooded. I didn't want anything to do with him. And I talked to Ma about it, and then the second time, and then I decided to go up there and talk to him. But I tell you, when you've been around these guys, you see, my dad worked. Turn that thing off here a minute.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me today and talking about this. Before we close, I just want to ask you on tape, do I have your permission to donate this recording to the public domain?
Yeah, okay, you have my permission.
All right. Well, thank you so much.